welcome back to another Film Geek video. Today I am discussing 5 80s horror films I don't feel get enough love. Now the 80s were a special time when it came to horror. So many massive franchises were born during this time period. Now I know that Halloween officially came out in '78, but I really feel like that franchise really got its stride in the 80s. We had Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Phantasm. So many great horror franchises that really went through the 80s and left their mark on horror or film in general. But today I'm talking about 5 movies that didn't really leave that massive of a mark, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they suck. So let's get this started, shall we? Now this is in no particular order. This is not a ranking video. This is just a list of different movies that I particularly enjoy that I don't think get enough love in 2024. Now let's get this party started with our first movie, 1987's Blood Diner. Blood Diner is directed by Jackie Kong, and it's starring Rick Burks and Carl Crew. It tells the story of 2 brothers who are trying to resurrect the Egyptian goddess Sheetar by using a giant cannibalistic feast. Yep, it's gonna be a big old splatterfest horror comedy. Guys, this film is hilarious. It is a weird, surreal horror film that just goes into so many strange places.
Best freaking veggie burger I've had in a son of a bitch long time.
The chemistry between the 2 brothers is outstanding. They both do a great job playing off of each other throughout the entire movie. In fact, the cast in this film is outstanding. Each one of these actors know exactly what kind of movie this is. These guys aren't making Shakespeare. They're just having a really good time. And you can definitely tell that there's moments in this movie where the cast just went, okay, we're just gonna do this for the hell of it. There's a whole scene where there's a ventriloquist dummy that no one really explains is a ventriloquist dummy. They just go ahead and treat him like he's a real person while the police are questioning somebody. That's just kind of humor this film is filled with. It is silly, goofy, and bloody. This film has tons and tons of gore in it. Well, originally, this film was actually going to be a sequel to the 1963 horror classic Blood Feast, which has a very similar storyline. But when Jackie Kong got her hands on the film, she felt that the script read more like a comedy, decided to throw in some more jokes, and get people to make it really B-rate and goofy. If this sounds like the kind of movie that you want to see, you can currently find this film streaming on Tubi. Next up, we're going to be going just one more year ahead to 1988 with Waxwork. Waxworks is written and directed by Anthony Hickox, and it's starring Deborah Foreman and Zach Galligan. It tells the story of a group of friends who visit this wax museum. And when they're looking at the different displays, they start to get kind of mesmerized. And they walk into the displays and suddenly they're teleported to whatever horror movie they were standing in front of. This film likes to dive into most of the old classic horror villains like the Wolfman, vampires, Marquis de Sade, you know, all the good old horror villains. Originally, this film was going to feature Jason Voorhees, some of the kids from Village of the Damned, and the monster from The Thing. But the film wasn't able to get the licensing rights to those characters, so they just went with the more classic monsters. Now, although Jason is not featured in this film, Kane Hodder, who is famously known for playing Jason, is unaccredited in this film. He does some of the stunts in the movie, and he's also in makeup as Frankenstein's monster. Now, this movie isn't something that you would consider a very scary horror film. Now, it does have some very good practical effects when it comes to the gore department, has some great makeup effects with transformations from human to werewolf and things of that sort, but when it comes down to lots and lots of scares and atmosphere and things of that sort, this movie really tries to play the horror more for the laughs. It's more of a fun horror action adventure film than it is something that's going to scare you. So if you're wanting something come this Halloween season that's not going to scare the pants off of you, you're going to have some horror attached to it, but most of all, you're going to have a great time, then maybe 1988's Waxwork is the movie for you. And good news, it is streaming on Tubi. That brings us to our next film, 1983's Psycho 2. Now, if you were not aware that there was a sequel to Psycho, guess what? There's actually 4 Psycho movies. And I was planning on doing a ranking video for those films this month, but I thought this would be a little bit more fun, doing 5 different movies and all, with Halloween coming up. But I did decide to go ahead and focus on Psycho 2, because I feel like this is a really unique slasher sequel because it doesn't try to be the same movie as the one before. It flips the script. Where Norman Bates is the villain in the first movie, now I guess you could say he's the final guy in this film. I like the way that Norman Bates is depicted in this film. It flips the script. It changes things. He goes from being the villain in the first film, which you have zero sympathy for. By this time in this film, you have a lot of sympathy for him. Norman Bates knows exactly what he did and why he did it. And he's trying to get over all of the trauma and terrible things that Mother did to him when he was a child. And those things that led him to become the psychopath that he was. And I like that the film utilizes all of that to make you feel sorry for him. And then the film makes you think that he might be going crazy. And all of that is going against him. He wants to get over his horrible past, but at the same time, he's haunted by his past. Because for some weird reason, they decided to just give him back the Bates Motel and also his house that all these terrible things happened to him. They're like, man, mental health today, it just sucks. All right, Norman, here's your house, here's your hotel. Hope this doesn't trigger you any. And then the film goes into this whole thing where it might be him being triggered by all of this, or somebody might be jacking with him. So you not only have a slasher film, you also have a nice little mystery attached to it. So all in all, this is a really well done, well made sequel to a movie that is an absolute classic. And it does show that you can make these legacy sequels and still make a very solid film. I like the fact that this movie takes place 23 years after the first film, and it does take that long. He's been in a psychiatric ward for the last 23 years, and he's so far, rehabilitated, and he's able to get back into society. So I like the fact that they use the actual time frame of real time for this movie. It really adds to it a little bit. So if you were not aware that the film Psycho 2 exists, guess what? You can currently find it streaming right now on Netflix, and I know that you probably have a Netflix subscription. Next up is a Wes Craven film that for some reason has gone under the radar for some time. 1988's Serpent and the Rainbow. Serpent and the Rainbow is directed by Wes Craven and it's starring Bill Pullman. It tells the story of an anthropologist who goes to Haiti to investigate some strange happenings that are going on down there. He hears a story of a man who supposedly died, buried alive, and then comes back to life in the graveyard. People believe he's a living zombie. Now, what causes this is a voodoo powder that makes your body go into a state where it seems like you are 110% dead. Your heart slows, everything flushes out of you. Doctors do not know that you are 100% alive. And guess what? Of course, you are 100% aware of everything that's going on around you. And let's just say it's a good thing that there wasn't any kind of autopsies or anything done on these guys. They were just like, yeah, that dude's dead. Put him in the ground. That's just kind of how the movie goes. And here's the other thing. This film is actually based off of a non-fiction book written by Wade Davis. Now, the book tells more of the story of the person who was buried and all of the scientific things that go on with this voodoo powder, the zombie powder. We're just going to call it that. This film, however, it taps on that, but then it goes into Wes Craven psychological horror goodness. Now, this film is a bit of a slow burn. There's a lot of investigation and things that go on during this film, to the point where at some moments you completely forget that you're watching a horror movie and you're not watching a medical drama. And then out of nowhere, voodoo shit happens and you're like, oh yeah, this is a Wes Craven film, totally forgot. This movie does have some jump scares, but it mostly just relies on psychological horror. Now, this film does have a little bit of blood in it, but it's not something I would consider necessarily overly gory. So if you're somebody who doesn't like all the really nasty gore that you could find in some of these horror films, this is a movie for you to check out. It's pretty tame when it comes to the gore, but it really keeps you interested in the more psychological horror. The last movie I'm going to talk about started the decade off, and that is 1980's The Chainling. The Chainling is directed by Peter Medoc, and it's starring George C. Scott and Trish Von Devra. This film is based off of mysterious events that allegedly happened at the Henry Treat Mansion in Denver, Colorado. This film is a really great slow burn horror mystery. It really takes its time to unfold, but at no time do you feel very bored. While you're in the house, the mansion itself, it keeps a very creepy, eerie vibe. There's plenty of good scare-crafted moments, lots of good special effects for the old ghosties in the house. All in all, this is a very solid haunted house horror film. Now, the mansion that appears in this film doesn't even really exist. The filmmakers could not find a house that they wanted to use for this film in the area they were filming in, so they ended up buying a house that they thought would work a little bit, and then ended up making the front of the house look like this big gothic mansion, and then everything inside the house was built and filmed on an actual set. And guys, it looks amazing. You would never know in a million years that this was not filmed in an actual house. The amount of detail that they did to the set dressing in this film is outstanding. I mean, there's literal dust on the floor in some scenes. Just the love and tender care that was made in the making of this film to build the set and create a mansion that doesn't even exist is mind-blowing to me, honestly. I don't feel that in today's world, they would actually spend the money or the time to do something like this. They would just be like, all right, we'll film this on a set, you know, CGI the house, whatever. We got other things we can do. So it's kind of neat to the story of this film that they actually just bought this house, dressed up the outside of it to make it look like some kind of gothic mansion, and then filmed inside of a studio. It's just great. And the cinematography in this film is outstanding. And I probably wouldn't have been able to get away with some of the shots in this movie if it wouldn't have been filmed on a set. I think if it was filmed on location in an actual house, there was some really cool panning shots, and the way that the camera kind of follows George C. Scott around sometimes. I don't think they could have pulled that stuff off in an actual house, because they would have to have probably torn down some walls and everything to get some of these shots. The practical effects in this film are outstanding. It really makes you feel like there is a ghost living in this house with them. The mystery of this story is where this film shines. It does kind of get a little convoluted and strange at the end of the film, but it really holds your attention for the entire movie, to the point where you are more interested in finding out what happened to the ghost of this house than the actual ghost living in the house. You just want to know what's going on with the story, and then, you know, like, okay, well, once we find that out, I guess, figure out what to do with your ghost, dude. I don't know. So if you're looking for a very creepy haunted house horror story to watch this Halloween that doesn't have a lot of blood and guts or anything like that, just a well-crafted mystery and some good old-fashioned ghosty special effects, well, you can currently find this film streaming on Peacock. Well, alright guys, there you have it. 5 80s horror films that I just don't feel get enough love in today's world. So if you enjoy what you saw here, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, and give me the old thumbs up so I know you like what you're seeing. And if there's one more thing you can do, folks, that is keep watching movies. You know I'm gonna.